Welcome back to Black Swan Outdoors, and today's loadout video here is going to be what I'm calling the peasant's loadout, and I'm just saying that kind of cheek and tongue. But the idea here would be kind of what a peasant revolutionary might pack with them. I kind of heat and hawed on how to do this video and thought about purchasing specific gear for this, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to use, just like the other videos, use the gear that I have and kind of supplement and talk about some of the items. So I've based this gear list today off of Che Guevara's guerrilla warfare. The list that he uses in that title of that book that he wrote. And it's a very interesting book. I definitely suggest reading it. It's very, very interesting. And, you know, when you think about revolutionaries, when you think about resistance fighters, they're often, you know, needing to do guerrilla warfare, unconventional warfare, and then, you know, they hit a column, ambush, whatever, and then retreat back into an area. Generally, it's going to be what Che calls rough country. So the idea here is that the gear that you're going to have on you, your ability to perform in that environment is critical, and in the too much gear or too much stuff that you have with you is going to impede your ability to do what you need to do. So performance equals adaptability to your environment in his case. The other thing we need to think about too is you're completely self-contained. So there isn't any resupply. There aren't any caches anywhere. This isn't part of, you know, the United States military, you know, industrial war complex where there's, you know, aid stations and ways to, you know, get batteries and food even. You know, there's times where you're going weeks, you know, without food, if much at all. So whether it's the Marquis, you know, this is the French revolutionaries that, you know, the Marquis refers back to scrubland, or refers to scrubland, which is where they would kind of retreat back to, or you're the, you know, fighting fascists in Spain or Italy. You know, a guerrilla warfare is what it is. It's very, very, it's often done very remote. You need to be quickly move. And most importantly, or just as important, is, you know, these days when you see people who, whether it be from, you know, 2020 and all the chaotic craziness we had, you see all this tactical gear online that people post, whether it be in the news or YouTube videos like this or whatever, and they're focusing in on kind of Gucci gear. It's all about, look at me, look at me. Here's this fancy gear that I have, you know, plate carriers, you know, several, you know, thousands of dollars of weapons, you know, all the high-end stuff. Well, you know, a peasant or the actual, you know, laborers and workers aren't going to be able to have that kind of gear. They're not going to have access to that kind of weaponry. So it's very much kind of an interesting phenomenon that you have all these kind of, you know, both hardcore leftists kind of trying to bring solidarity, and then also you have these hardcore right-wingers bringing their own solidarity amongst themselves, and a lot of them, you know, can afford bits and pieces. And, you know, when you're talking about a revolutionary movement and you're talking about fighting with the people, the vast majority of people in any country are going to be poor people. And that's the biggest significant difference about who you're fighting for and what. And I talk a lot about this on the blog, in the blog too. So if you're interested in that topic, I don't need to go too much farther into it. So for Cuba and for Che, fighting in the Sierra Maestra, you know, the weather changed quite a bit. It was hot and humid. It would rain at times. It got very cold. So they had to, you know, be very, very adaptable in terms of the clothing and the gear that they had with them. And that's really, really important. Okay, so let me jump into this. You know, the thing, one more thing is that, you know, you had Che kind of pointed out a couple things. One was that you had to be able to fight in the rain, fight in the cold, and weather, and in any kind of conditions in which you are being harassed by your enemy. So the austere conditions that you would be in are the conditions in which you're going to be fighting in. And so you have to be, again, you have to think about the gear choices that you have in those conditions. A lot of times we practice, whether it be tactical maneuvers are done, or wilderness survival practice, all the stuff done in fair weather, behind a house or close to home, or in a very safe and protected environment. And when you're out in the field, as the guerrillas were fighting, you have none of this. You can't fight in the optimal conditions. You fight in the conditions that you are in. So in the terrain that you're in. Okay, so too much of that. Let's jump into the gear, because that's what you guys are here for. So you're going to see a lot of the gear that we've talked about in previous videos, but we're going to talk about it just in a different context. That's kind of the idea. So first and foremost, jacket, coat, in extreme cold weather. So to represent that, I have this awesome parka that I picked up for, I think, like 40 bucks at an Army surplus store. This thing is heavy duty. It's got pit zips, it's got a good hood, it works well. I use it primarily for hunting, but it's super rugged, and it's Gore-Tex, it breathes, so you can use this. It's a little heavy in the summer, granted, but in a, if you're in a cold rain, it is nice to have. So big fat parka, I think that's awesome. I'll move that aside so I can get some room in here. So with that, then a stocking cap. I think that, if you want to keep warm, a stocking cap is the way to go. Balaclava, whatever you want too, but a wool cap, wool watchman's cap, I think is fine. And then he says, trousers and a shirt and boots. So of course, boots here. These are actually Gore-Tex. They're not terribly expensive, but they're actually pretty good quality. They're from Under Armour, actually, of all things. Definitely, I would put money, if you were going to put money in somewhere, good boots makes a lot of sense, and good socks. Smart wool, merino wool, when and if possible. It makes absolutely no sense if your primary form of transportation is your feet, then it makes sense to get the best possible shoes, put your money into your shoes before you put it into things like plate carriers or, all that stuff. You need to have the foundations first before you can branch off into some of the more esoteric things. So that's boots and socks. So he says, trousers and a shirt. So I just have some, multi-cam pants. Again, these are, I think $5. I think $1 for this shirt. So whatever. It's Army surplus. It's fine. And then he says hammock and hammock rope. Now, instead of a hammock, I'm going to opt for a backpacker's tarp. This could be, you could pick up any kind of tarp very, very cheap from any kind of big box store, those big blue tarps and things like that. But this is just a nylon tarp. To me, this is a little bit more functional for more environment. So in an urban environment, you're probably going to be better off, if you're sleeping on pavement, if you're sleeping on parks, or wherever you'd find yourself being, or in a home, whatever. You probably have more options sleeping on the ground than you would with a hammock in the tent. That's just me, but I see the value in what he was talking about with the hammock, and it was very common for guerrilla fighters to use hammocks in the Civil War, for example. John Brown and his fighters were rumored to have also used hammocks. So, that was something, easy. It comes from the days of the ships where, people would sleep in hammocks in a ship to save room and whatnot. So, all right. So anyway, aside from your your sleep, you're going to have some type of food. I used MRE here to represent that. That's probably something not what a guerrilla fighter would have. In his day, obviously it was before dehydrated food. You needed food that was not going to be perishable. His list of food items was lard, oil, salt, preserved fish, condensed milk, and various spices such as onion and garlic. And then they would find meat and vegetables and things from foraging and from stealing or taking or or asking people. And actually, in a revolt where the community supports what you're doing, they will freely give you the food and the things that you need quite often, because they can't fight, but they respect the fact that you're fighting for a good cause. And that is what helps win a war, and that's what helped win the Cuban War, or the Cuban Revolution. Very similarly, in France, the country was very much divided, and so oftentimes the Marquis would actually do highway robbery when they couldn't get assistance through the spy networks and the resistance networks. So a lot of times these Marquis in the country were considered to be bad because they had robbed towns or robbed people to get their supplies, because there were so many people aligned with the Hun, with the Germans. So food is really important, keeps you moving, and it's going to be few and far between. So making sure you have food is important in that way. A rifle cleaning kit. So this is my kit. I probably would strip this down. Back in the day, they didn't have fancy rifle cleaning kits like this available to them in many places. So it would be, ripped up pieces of old t-shirt and cotton cloth. It would be, instead of hops 10 oil, it would be a sewing machine oil. It would be grease, and so on. So, this would just be a little bit more than what I think the typical guerrilla fighter would have. And then he would also have ammo and an ammo belt. So I've got a few magazines here to represent that ammo belt. I've got this chest rig. I've used this chest rig for a number of years, and I've wanted to upgrade actually. But the reason why I have it on here is as a representation that, again, we're going to want to talk a little bit about that Gucci mentality. That people buy extremely expensive gear, and it's never going to be tested in the environment that it's at, or people want to buy like types of gear to emulate, Navy SEALs or, special forces, but they're never going to do the things, that these operators are going to do. So they spend more money on this kind of stuff and less on, good quality socks or things that actually makes a difference. The standard mil spec, or just, decently stitched, gear is fine. You don't need to go overboard. And, for the guerrilla fighter, they're going to be making their own stuff. So you want to be comfortable with being able to make your own gear. Chi-Com, could be a good representative of a peasant's, chest rig versus something like this even, or Haley Strategic or any of the other companies that are out there. So, for me, this was a Condor chest rig. The stitching on the chest rig itself is fine. I have this large admin pouch, which I sometimes remove, sometimes I keep it, sometimes I don't. I use this primarily for hunting, and I can use it then for training as well. I'm kind of hit or miss on this pouch. The stitching's not that great on the Velcro, but everything else has actually been fine. And I've run it through its paces for a number of years, so this whole thing can actually attach to the larger bag, which I do kind of like as well. So I've got a radio pouch, magazine pouches, shotgun shells, and then yeah. So I'll do a loadout on this thing sometime if you're interested. We can add that to the video list. Okay, so next thing he has on here is a canteen and water bottle. So something that you can carry your water with. I would use, if I was in a rural environment, more restricted environment, I would use a largemouth water bottle. That would just be me. But anything's going to work here. This attaches to the chest rig fine. So water is extremely important. Medications. Che was a doctor, so he really knew what kind of medications and had a good recommendation of the medications that his fighters should have: penicillin, aspirin, antibiotics, GI meds, he suggested, and then any kind of meds for endemic diseases and injections for any kind of poisonous snakes in your area. That's what he would recommend his guys to have with him. So what you can find, you can, take with you. And then I love this pipe. So, of course, a lot of the Cubans were smokers, and I love the suggestion of the pipe because you can always scrounge for tobacco, whether it be cigarette butts or whatever, and put it in a pipe and smoke it. It's easier, cheaper to find loose tobacco. And so I just love that kind of concept of, sitting back and in the mountains in a hammock, probably reading and smoking a pipe. But again, it's about adaptability. And so you want to find the tools that are going to help you be adaptable. Matches and lighter, certainly you want to be able to start fires, having fires for cooking. And then lastly is a kind of a mess kit. So knife, fork, and spoon. So we have a knife, fork, and spoon. So you want to make sure you have a cup. You want a bigger bowl for boiling water, something for cleaning up with, that kind of thing. This is an extra one for making as a makeshift frying pan or using as a plate. So you certainly would want to have some kind of mess kit that you can prepare your own meals. I don't have a fork. That's okay. I'm very rarely going to use a fork, especially if you're just a large spoon, and a knife seems to be good enough for me. And then that's it. That's really pretty much the bulk of what he recommends to have in your pack. And I think and that's pretty much what he recommends to have it in the pack. There are some additional items which he kind of lists as accessories. So these aren't absolutes, but these are things that if you have it, it would be good to include. So a compass, he suggests. Certainly, someone in the group is going to have a compass. You're almost always going to be with other people, so it's not necessary for everyone to have a compass in that regard. But pack cover, since it is raining all the time. Having something to keep your gear dry while you're laying in your hammock would be important. Certainly that would be something that could be stitched, or having like a small tarp, like a cut, just cutting a small tarp down would be a good example, good thing of that. Change of clothing. Instead of carrying some bulky clothes, I carry many smaller, lighter clothes, so I would have long underwear, just layers, instead of carrying like a larger parka. And then that gives you the ability to change and do whatever. And then socks, of course. You can never have enough socks. So I'm thinking 3 pairs of socks if it was me. But then toothpaste, toothbrush, kind of hygiene. I think that, of course, that's important. He would know the importance of hygiene and being a doctor. And then he said a book. So book, notebook, and pencil. So you could write home, write notes, that kind of thing. So having, something to read and whatnot. Of course, this is pre-electronic books. So, you would read a book and then you'd pass it on to your buddy, and everyone would share in a library. And that's kind of that was a thing that people did back in the day. He said string or rope, if you had it. Certainly lots of functionality. I have there's a whole big old mess of 550 cord. I love rope, knot tying, and all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of stuff you could do. The Marquis, when they went into the woods, they would build, structures with string and twine and rope, all sorts of kind of makeshift structures, benches, tables, the tripods, all sorts of pioneering type camp gadgets that would be lashed, things would be lashed together. So I could imagine other guerrilla fighters doing the same. If you have then sweets, this is just power bars, but you could have sweets, candy, Skittles, whatever you would need, just kind of a pick-me-up, morale type thing, of course. And then lastly, he said that if you have, after all of this, and you have extra room in your pack, what are you going to pack with you? Extra food. You can always pick up extra ammo. You can always get some of the extras of other stuff. But food. Food is the fuel for the fight. So if you have that extra room, have that food. So with that, this was the Peasant's Loadout, or Che Guevara's recommendation from Guerrilla Warfare. I hope you like this video. More videos will come. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments down below, or if I got any historical information incorrect. I hope I didn't. And again, like and subscribe, and you'll see me in the next video.